This story is told from a female's perspective.
In 2007, I went on a date with a guy from Craigslist. I was 17 years old at the time. I put an ad up looking to meet someone. I don't remember the details. A guy responded who lived close to me, and so I emailed him back and gave him my number. He was actually one of the only ones who responded without a creepy message. He said his name was John and he was 26 years old. This guy, John, and I spoke for 2 days before meeting, and we met on a Friday night. We texted back and forth and he asked if I was single. I said yes. He asked what kind of food I like to eat because he wanted to take me to a restaurant. I asked him a few questions about himself. He told me he still lived with his mother but had the top floor to himself, and that he was a part-time model that made good money. So on a Friday night, John comes to pick me up. He drove a silver two-door car. I want to say Ford. He popped me a message to say he was waiting outside. And after checking my hair and makeup one last time, I said goodbye to my parents, telling them I was heading out with friends, and left. I got into John's car, and the first thing I noticed was that he looked exactly like his photo, the tall, dark, and handsome type. He had pale skin with dark hair and dark eyes. He looked a little older in person, but he made up for it with a snappy fashion sense. He was incredibly kind, and his body language and smile totally put me at ease. Yes, it's really stupid to go on a date from Craigslist, but surprisingly, the guy was normal. We chatted for a while as he started driving away from my hometown towards the highway. He wanted to drive us into the city to go to dinner, which wasn't too far, around a 25-minute journey. John started to reveal more details about himself to me on this journey. He told me he was embarrassed to tell me he lived with his mother, that I might think bad of him for not having his own place at his age. John got closer and closer to the highway, and I can't tell you what it was. I won't make it up because I don't remember. But it wasn't anything remotely creepy. I just felt put off by him. You know where you're on a date with someone and you're not sure, then they tell you something that's your biggest turnoff? It was kind of that situation. Again, he didn't say anything too creepy, just off-putting. As we're getting closer and closer to the turnoff, I tell this perfectly nice guy, "I'm really sorry, I don't feel like going to dinner anymore. I'm not feeling well." John's initial reaction was sympathy.
"What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it my driving?"
I told him I just didn't feel well. John then kept asking me,
"What did I say? What did I do?"
I told him it's not him, it's me. I wanted to go home because I felt ill.
"Okay, let me just drive around for a little bit before I take you back. I don't want to end the night like this."
I knew that without him driving me home, I'd have to walk over an hour, maybe more. So I told him that driving for a bit sounded like a fine idea. But instead of him turning around and going back towards mine, he veered off and started heading to the town I knew he lived in. I should mention, it was pitch black out, and the town where John lived was surrounded by dense wood. This isn't even worth mentioning if you take the highway and proper turnoffs to get there, but he decided he wanted to go via the back roads because it's more scenic, despite the fact that I couldn't see a thing. John had gone from being incredibly talkative to almost completely silent. He kept driving further into the wooded area. A few times I'd ask him questions about himself to break the awkward silence. At one point I put my hand on his knee, affectionately trying to regain the friendly flirty banter we had earlier. He blanked me, for the most part, occasionally answering in soft grunts or nods. It's like he was throwing a tantrum. It was around 9 p.m., so naturally it was totally empty. He slowly kept driving, looking around for other cars, and then parked himself up right at the end. Close to the woods, of course. There was nobody else in the parking lot, and I hadn't even seen us pass other cars to get there. For 10 minutes he just sat there, staring into the darkness ahead, which was disturbing. I think I managed to make small talk for maybe 5 minutes, which is a long time when someone isn't talking back. Then I joined him in his silence. I was afraid of appearing fake. I didn't want him to think I was scared. So some time of silence goes past, and abruptly John gets out of the car, closes the door and locks it. I was stuck inside. His lights were on, so I could sort of see ahead. In front of the car was a field that maybe went on for about 20 feet, so really it was just a patch of grass. And beyond that were trees and dense forest. To the left of that was the rest of the car park and exit at the far end, and to the immediate right was more forest with a small path. John disappeared into the forest ahead. I tried the handle on the door. It wouldn't open. I began to rationalize this. Maybe he accidentally locked the door? I was telling myself that if he really wanted to do something, he would have stayed in the car. With no sight of John, I decided I needed to call someone. I looked around for my phone and I couldn't find it. This was an old silver pay-as-you-go flip phone. I was confused that I couldn't find it because I had put it right next to me in the cup holder. After looking for it a few good times, I became sure he had taken it. Mind you, I didn't want to start rooting around his car knowing that he might be watching me. At that point, I started looking for my phone with only my eyes. Instead of making it obvious, I was petrified this guy was watching me panic in the darkness. My eyes were darting all over the floor. Nothing. John was standing about 10 feet from the car, on that small field. He was standing and smiling, and it wasn't a friendly smile. He looked freaky. This was not the same guy I got in the car with. I looked ahead and smiled back. I was still trying to act like his behavior was normal, like nothing he was doing was scary. Still smiling, his tongue began to protrude from his mouth. He stuck it all the way out. He began wagging his tongue up and down while maintaining eye contact with me. I felt myself trembling. I was trying to compose myself. Not taking his eyes off me, and with his tongue still out, he started unzipping his pants. He took out his dick and proceeded to urinate in front of me while staring the whole time. This is the point where I found it difficult to act like I was in on his behavior. I looked down at the floor, not wanting to watch what was in front of me. He didn't creep or slink back to the car. Instead, I hear his thundering steps and then a slam against the window. I guess at this point, I was the luckiest person alive because another car pulled up into the parking lot. I don't know what this did to John, but immediately he got back into the car and laughed at me. That normal laugh, and said,
"So, what music do you like? I'll put it on while I drive you home."
And he did. He drove me all the way home. When we pulled up to my house, I went for the door, but it was still locked.
"I want you to promise me something."
I asked him what that was.
If you ever see me after this, turn the other way. Act like you don't know me. If you see me with my family, don't you dare say a word. I don't expect to bump into you, but don't say anything.
I agreed. I then asked him if he'd seen my phone. He told me no. Well, I guess my phone was a small sacrifice considering the miracle of me making it home okay. When I got in, I said goodnight to my parents and went upstairs to my room and turned on my computer. I wanted to gather as much information about the guy as I could. Back then, I used MSN Messenger, and a lot like AIM, it logged me in automatically whenever I started up my PC. Now, before I get to the final part of the story, it's important you know this. One day before, I had been at my best friend's house. We had the kind of friendship where it was like, who could pick on the other the most? It was all good and fun, and we mostly just ripped the shit out of each other and had a good laugh. The day before, she had changed 2 contacts in my phone. An old prank, if you will. Replaced the contact mom with the guy I had been sending sexual texts back and forth with. I immediately knew she had done this because I saw the previous messages come up, but I didn't change the numbers back at the time, thinking I'd do it later. So when I logged in to MSN, I had a ton of messages from this guy and a few from my best friend. When John had locked me in the car, he had taken my phone and texted mom telling her,
"I'm sorry, but I decided to move out. I've met someone. Please don't look for me. I am happy being left alone."
So another thing about that message was it was all written in text speak. Swap please with PLZ, for example. And this guy knew I never texted like that. Aside from the message itself, this was a big red flag. He had texted me back. He showed me on the camera a question mark before texting again saying,
"I don't think this is you. I know where you went, and I'm calling the police."
This was incredibly quick thinking, as he had absolutely no idea where I was. I think that text saved my life that night. And it explains John's sudden change of behavior. If it wasn't the random car, it was the text. Afterwards, we tried to find this guy online by name and by email. I couldn't find anything. It seemed everything on him was fake. My best friend pressed me to call the police, but I never did because I feared the retribution I'd get from my parents for going on a date with a guy I didn't even know. My friend ended up betraying my trust. I know, she's the smart one. And telling my mom anyway, who still didn't call the police, but instead did what I expected and banned me from my PC and going out, while also calling me an idiot. There is something else too. Turns out the guy's first name was John, and he did in fact live in the town he said he did. Around 3 years later, I started going out with a guy from that very town named Chris. We were talking about exes one day, and I told him about my creepy encounter. I didn't even get halfway through the story before he stopped me and started asking questions about what John looked like, how old he looked, how old he said he was, etc. Turns out he knew him. This guy was now in prison for attacking and raping a 14-year-old girl and beating her bloody in a nearby park. She survived without long-term injury. That was just what he was in prison for, though. My friend told me he was well known for being a creep way before that, and his friends even called him Creepy John. He would go around the nearby parks where he knew the younger girls hung out, and he would ask them to get in his car or take their photo. He would always tell them he was a model too. My boyfriend at the time first met him when he was 12 because John decided to take up skateboarding and tried to make friends with lots of the young boys in the skate park. He couldn't believe I'd actually got in the car with him. Anyway, that's Reddit user ThrowawayL26's story about possibly, maybe, or nearly being murdered, raped, or beaten. Hope you enjoyed. If anyone is wondering, yes, John is still in prison today. And if you're still listening to this, I just want to reiterate the moral of this story, just that everyone you meet on the internet isn't your friend. Except for me. I am your best friend. And with me being your best friend, you should maybe subscribe so that we can keep in touch, maybe. Or you can give me a thumbs up. Or a thumbs down if you're a really, really critical friend. But if anything, just a lot of feedback is pretty much what I'm looking for. It's up to you guys to determine my future. So, I mean, I'm greatly appreciative of you making it this far. What is this? I just made 11 minutes. 11 minutes of listening to a stranger talk to himself or talk to a robot. Huh. It's pretty nice. Interesting. But yeah, I never thought of it that way. But I'm fairly new to this, and I don't mean to drag, but just know you got to be safe out there. And once again, thank you for listening. So, you're still here. You know, this is the part where like my next video comes up, but you know, I kind of need some subscribers and a thumbs up, maybe. It's possible. I mean, that usually helps that. I'm going to let you guys go about your day. So, XO. Oh, by the way, you should look behind you. Yeah, I know these things.